I mean, I had to water the freaking wheels because those wooden rims, the wood had shrunk.
Search Tom Smith's name today, and the internet tells you he's dead. Except he's not. Someone built that lie using real obituaries and the wrong man's identity, and it spread fast. But here's where it gets worse. When you trace it back, it is some random internet mistake. It leads straight to Richard Rawlings and the shop where Tom Smith used to work. So how does a working mechanic end up declared dead online? And more importantly, what really happened after Misfits Garage? Join us as we find out the truth about what happened to Tom Smith after Misfits Garage. The wrong kind of famous. Tom Smith's path to that shop floor ran through a Georgia junkyard, an Ohio race circuit, and a railway track he probably should have avoided. His uncle owned a salvage yard in Georgia, and Tom was already elbow-deep in cars at 10 years old, the same age he mowed enough lawns to buy his first car, a 1973 Pontiac Granville, for himself. Back in Ohio as a teenager, he deliberately picked a 1967 Ford Galaxie XL convertible with a 428 cubic-inch Police Interceptor engine, specifically because everyone around him drove Chevys. His exact words were, he could not ride over a cliff in a Chevy, so he bought a Ford. That car died when he drove it over a railway track at 120 miles per hour and broke it in half. His real mechanical education came from Carl Parsons, a master mechanic well known in Ohio racing circles for extracting every last horsepower from an engine, who took Tom under his wing. By the time Tom reached Texas and the Gas Monkey team, he was carrying a Ford Master Mechanic certification and an ASC certified mechanic credential. Not someone who stumbled into a TV show, but someone who'd spent decades earning the right to be in that shop. And long before anyone searched his name looking for tragedy, Tom Smith was just another face on a crowded shop floor. He worked under Richard Rawlings at Gas Monkey Garage, the Dallas shop at the center of Fast and Loud, a Discovery hit that ran 16 seasons and helped build Rawlings into one of the network's biggest stars. Tom wasn't hired to be funny. He was hired to fix drivability problems, the unglamorous engine trouble that never makes a highlight reel. But week after week, he kept stealing the scene anyway. He had a habit of narrating his own work like a stand-up bit, throwing out one-liners mid-repair that nobody asked for and everybody remembered. Fans started clipping his best moments and passing them around online, and across comment sections, he picked up a nickname that stuck: Big Tom, the guy viewers routinely singled out as the actual highlight of the show. For a guy whose job had nothing to do with comedy, Tom had quietly become one of the most talked-about people on the show, popular enough that when his firing made headlines in 2014, it ran as celebrity news, not car show news. Fast and Loud worked because every episode reinforced one idea. Richard was the star, the risk-taker, the man making the big calls. A mechanic pulling bigger laughs than the boss wasn't part of that plan. Tom's charisma kept growing exactly while the show needed him to stay in the background. And that contradiction set the stage for what came next. A falling out that depends entirely on who's telling the story. By Tom's own account, given to entertainment reporters back in 2014, the breaking point came from something almost embarrassingly small. A fan with cystic fibrosis asked to take a photo standing next to Richard's Rolls-Royce. Tom said yes. The on-duty manager, Richard, came out and told the fan to get away from the car and reportedly chewed Tom out on the spot. Tom didn't take it well, told the manager exactly where to put the lecture. And within hours, both he and fellow mechanic Jordan Butler were fired. Not for the photo itself, but for how Tom responded to being called out over it. A photo and a smart mouth, allegedly the entire reason two multi-season television personalities lost their jobs. It sounds almost too small to be the real explanation, and plenty of fans have said exactly that for years, because here's the detail that makes the story stranger the longer you sit with it. The man who fired Tom is the very same man who, almost immediately afterward, helped put him on a brand new television show. Richard didn't just own the garage Tom got fired from, he went on to executive produce the spin-off series Tom landed on next, a show built entirely around the idea that Tom and his fired friends were now Richard's rivals. One man in charge of the firing, the second chance, and the version of the rivalry that got cut together for prime time every week. That's not a small coincidence. That's the kind of detail that makes you wonder whether the breakup was ever really a breakup at all, or just the first scene of a show nobody had announced yet. So, if the firing wasn't entirely real, what was the shop built on it actually running on underneath? And how much of what audiences believed was a rebellion against Richard Rawlings was something Richard Rawlings was quietly financing the entire time? Rigged from both sides. The answer starts with a joke Tom had been carrying around for decades. Back in the late 1980s, he'd painted a line on the side of his toolbox. F&U Auto Service. Our customers have been satisfying us since 1973. It was a throwaway gag from a young mechanic with no idea it would become an actual business name years later. When he, Jordan, Thomas Weeks, and Scott McMillan needed a name for the shop they were building after getting let go, that old joke became a real business. By Tom's own account, Fired Up Garage wasn't an insult aimed at Richard, though plenty of fans have never quite believed that's the whole story. Discovery turned that shop into Misfit Garage, and the marketing told a clean, simple story. 4 underdogs, fired and humiliated, building something of their own to prove the man who let them go was wrong about them. It's a good story. It's also not the full one. Richard was the landlord of the building Fired Up Garage operated out of, a fact the show itself disclosed in its very first season. And according to Top Speed, he reportedly collected around $22,000 for every appearance he made on a show built to look like a rebellion against him, a figure that circulated widely in entertainment coverage of the show, though it was never officially confirmed by either party. He wasn't the only credited executive producer. Pilgrim Studios' Craig Piligian and Eddie Rowetter shared that title, along with Discovery's Craig Kaufman, but he was the only one with a personal financial stake in how the on-screen rivalry got written. That fact never made it into a single trailer across the show's 6-season run, even though Misfit Garage drew 1.5 million viewers for its premiere and averaged around 1.3 million across its first season. An audience that had no idea the landlord collecting rent on the underdog shop was the same man the underdog story was supposedly written against. It couldn't. The same person was quietly running both sides of it. The space itself told the same story. The building Fired Up Garage operated out of had previously been rented by Phipps Automotive, and multiple viewers reported that the shop appeared to never actually be open to the public. A sign by the gate stated it was a closed set, a show that launched to over 1 million viewers, with the rival's landlord quietly cutting the checks behind the camera. None of that makes the show fake, exactly. It makes it produced, and produced is a very different thing from the spontaneous comeback story fans were sold week after week. For Tom personally, that meant something else, too. The guy who'd gotten famous for refusing to stay in the background at Gas Monkey Garage was now working inside a shop where the creative direction, the budget, and the entire storyline were still being controlled by someone else. He'd traded one version of Richard's shadow for a second one, with a different name painted on the door, and the show kept selling that second shadow as freedom. Every version of Tom Smith that made it to air was someone else's edit. So who was he when nobody was cutting around him? Life, off script. Off camera, Tom was living an entirely different life, one that had nothing to do with torquey wrenches or televised rivalries. Before any of that, Tom spent several years doing a job that almost nobody who watched him on television would have guessed: working on television towers. One of those towers was Tower 2 of the World Trade Center. He holds a patent on a kill switch he invented for towers, and he was the first person to outfit a hoist with a fuel-injected engine. After leaving the tower industry, he spent 4 years working on hot rods for Driver's Edge in Texas, before eventually crossing paths with Richard Rawlings. The man audiences thought of as a natural-born television personality had, before the cameras arrived, already built, patented, and moved on from an entire career in a completely different industry. He's a working stand-up comedian, with regular sets at the Dallas Improv and occasional shows at Christie's, a comedy club in Manhattan. This wasn't something Misfit Garage invented for ratings. By his own account, he'd been chasing comedy long before Discovery ever pointed a camera at him. And he often told reporters how badly he wanted to bring a full bit onto the show itself, including one where he goes door to door in a neighborhood full of no soliciting signs, trying to sell people more no soliciting signs. The stories about his younger years are even harder to picture as anything other than a sitcom pitch. The way Tom has told it, he was already taking cars out for joyrides at age 10, years before he could legally drive, and one night he nearly got caught by police. Instead of pulling over, 10-year-old Tom tried to outrun the cops and ended up crashing straight into a cruiser. As a rookie mechanic years later, he once worked on a car he hated so much that, once the engine finally ran clean, he decided the only fitting send-off was turning it into a makeshift boat and driving it into a lake, where it sank almost immediately. He's also said he placed third in a state spelling bee at age 10, and that 2 of his personal heroes are Albert Einstein and the science fiction writer Isaac Asimov. An odd detail for a man best known for fixing carburetors, and exactly the kind of detail that makes him feel like a person instead of a character. None of these stories ever made it onto Misfit Garage. Neither did the part of his life spent helping rescue and transport dogs that needed somewhere safe to go, a habit he kept up quietly for years without ever turning it into a storyline. When he wasn't on a set or doing a comedy set, Tom was also decorating walls in friends' homes freehand, using nothing but Sharpies, sometimes up to 200 of them on a single wall. He once described himself as a man who used to be a great drawer and is now merely a good one. None of it made it onto the show either. During an earlier chapter of his life, Tom was married to a woman named Deanna Wetzel. He worked nights as a mechanic so she could attend nursing school, taking care of their child himself during the day. By the time Misfit Garage was filming, that marriage had ended, and Tom kept the details of it almost entirely private. The man whom audiences watched argue with Richard every Wednesday night was spending the rest of his week doing comedy sets, telling outlandish stories about his childhood, and driving dogs to new homes. That gap is exactly the kind of vacuum strangers rush to fill, and not always kindly. When a public personality only exists to an audience through one carefully edited version of himself, and that version suddenly disappears, people don't usually assume he went back to an ordinary life. They assume something happened to him. So when Misfit Garage went quiet, without any explanation at all, what exactly was waiting to fill that silence? Killed for clicks. Misfit Garage ran for 6 seasons before it stopped airing in 2018. There was no farewell episode, nothing resembling closure. There was reportedly talk of a 7th season filming in 2020, but those plans never materialized, and Misfit Garage simply stopped without Discovery ever giving a clear explanation. The show simply wasn't renewed, and one day, The weekly check-ins with Tom and the fired-up garage crew just stopped showing up. For a few years, that silence was just silence. Then it became something else. Raw material. Search Tom's name today, and you'll find a wave of videos titled Heartbreaking Tragedy and Death Mystery Finally Solved, along with fake obituary pages claiming to document his passing. One of those obituary pages even lists a surviving wife and a long list of grandchildren, names that belong to a completely different man. A real obituary for an unrelated person, also named Thomas Smith, republished with the car guy's name pasted over the top because it draws clicks. This isn't one rumor that got out of hand. It's a formula, run on dozens of other reality television names using the same templates. Heartbreaking, tragedy, death mystery finally solved, swapped in and out like a script, with a blank space where the celebrity's name goes. Tom Smith simply happened to be next in the rotation, a real person turned into raw material for a content machine that doesn't particularly care whether the story is true, only whether it gets watched. It fits a pattern that runs through nearly every chapter of his public story. His firing might have been manufactured to set up a spin-off. His rivalry with Richard was manufactured by a man who owned both sides of it. And now, years later, even his death has been manufactured by people who never met him and clearly never checked. Except this time, the real story isn't hiding behind a producer's decision or a network's marketing plan. It's sitting in plain sight, recorded on camera, at the one location that ties this entire story together. The same Gas Monkey garage where it all supposedly started. So what actually happened when the man blamed for firing him sat back down across the table? And was any of it staged this time? Or finally, for once, not? Nothing left to sell. In December 2023, Tom walked back through the doors of Gas Monkey Garage, the same shop that let him go nearly a decade earlier, and sat down across from Richard for an episode titled The Return of Tom Smith, on Richard's own web series, Beer 30. There was no spin-off riding on this one, no new show being pitched, no tension manufactured for a season-long arc, just two men who'd spent years being cast as rivals, choosing on their own to share a drink and talk about everything that had happened between them. They went back over old stories, the years at Gas Monkey, the messy exit, the rumors that never quite got resolved on camera the first time around. None of it played out like a reunion built for ratings, because, by that point, neither man had anything riding on how it looked. Tom wasn't promoting a comeback. Richard wasn't launching another spin-off. It was simply two people closing a loop that a decade of produced television had never actually closed for them. That distinction matters because, until that afternoon, nothing about Tom Smith's public story had been left for him to control. Nearly every major beat in Tom's public story carries some kind of asterisk. The firing may have been staged to set up a spin-off. The rivalry that defined 6 seasons of television was financed by the same man it was supposedly aimed at. And the most recent chapter of his story, the one most people would actually find if they searched his name today, is a fabricated death pulled from a stranger's real obituary. The Beer 30 sit-down is the one clear exception. Nobody owned that moment but the two men sitting in it. No executive producer was trimming it down to fit a runtime built around tension. It happened because Tom decided to walk back into that shop, and because Richard decided to sit down with him, with a camera simply pointed at something that was going to happen either way. So here's where that leaves the question that probably brought you to this video. Tom Smith isn't gone, and there's no tragedy waiting to be uncovered. He's a working comedian, a quiet animal rescue volunteer, a mechanic with plenty of build stories still left to tell, and, as of a couple of years ago, a guy who made peace with the man who fired him, on his own terms, with nothing being sold to anyone. After a career built almost entirely on other people's decisions about how his story should look, that's the one part of it that finally, completely belonged to him. Do you think Richard staged that original firing to set up the spin-off? Or did two real tempers genuinely clash over a photo with a Rolls-Royce? And if a content farm can fabricate someone's death using a stranger's real obituary and still rack up views, how many other true stories about people you followed online were never true to begin with? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.